I know. You came here because you bought the WL Toys 144001 and you want to do the brushless conversion, but the body style is too tight to fit your components. So you bought the PhatBodies Atak body and you don't know how to trim it. And you're worried you're going to do it wrong, so you're looking for a video. This is the video. I've been there. I scoured the internet. I went through all the YouTube videos of the PhatBodies Atak model, and I was looking for the angles. You're looking for every single angle so that you could pause their video and see how the cut lines are drawn. So we're gonna go over this in a little bit more detail, and even if you didn't come specifically for this body style, we're gonna go over the aspects and instructions on how to best fit and trim the body to fit in your chassis. Some of you might be thinking, in order to trim the new Atak body shell, you can just stick the original one underneath and then trace along the lines. So there's nothing wrong with doing that, but I imagine a lot of you who are getting the new body style would like to cover more of the gaps. In other words, have more shell as opposed to less shell. So we're gonna get started on my method on how to do this. I realize this is daunting, and that's why you're watching a video about cutting a body shell. So the first cut you're gonna make is not gonna be an important one, but is basically for the purposes of having less bulk so that you can handle this more easily and to give you confidence to make more cuts. So the first cut we're gonna make is actually gonna be along the edge. So it's gonna be this edge right here. And so what I like to do is to cut not super tight to it, but to leave a millimeter or two shy of the actual corner or actual edge so that you can just build the confidence in cutting. So you're gonna cut that bulk out, and then if you want at the end, then you can start trimming a little bit tighter. That way you're not so committed on your first cut. Because again, I know you're only cutting a piece of plastic, but for some of us it's kind of daunting. So we're gonna go ahead and cut that edge. There's no decision making. You're literally just gonna cut that edge straight through from the very front to the very rear on both sides. You're gonna cut that. Again, you're gonna cut it at the edge. If you're confident enough, you can cut it straight to the edge. If not, leave 1 or 2 millimeters. The next cut we're gonna make, after we make decisions on how far forward and how far back we're gonna place the body, is gonna be the front edge and then the rear. And what that's gonna allow us to do is sit on the chassis to determine later how much of the shell we can cut for clearance of the suspension components. The number one biggest decision you're going to make in all of this is going to be the judgment of how far forward the body is going to sit versus how far back. So this placement in this direction is going to be crucial, and will basically, everything else will be governed based on that decision. So we're going to make that decision carefully, and we're going to talk about the limitations of how far forward and how far back based on a couple attributes of the body itself. There will be 4 things that will limit how far forward and how far back the body sits. The first one, number 1, is going to be the chassis of the car itself. The distance from here to here and where that curves in and where this curves in relative to the body. So you do have some flexibility, especially with this body, because the width from here to here is wider than from here to here. So you do have some play, but you don't have a ton of play. So that's the first limiting factor. The second limiting factor is going to be the body posts. So where these body posts come up and protrude into the body, into the shell, is going to determine how far back and how forward that can go. Although you can buy body posts that offset so that they come out of the body in a different location if you do choose to continue to use the body posts. Generally, most people are just going to keep the stock position and then it'll come up to wherever it is. The third thing that will judge and limit how far forward and how far back is going to be the components inside. So depending on how giant of an ESC you have or the other components inside the car, you may or may not be able to have that much flexibility in moving it forward or back. Okay. The fourth thing that's going to limit and help you determine where this body sits in this direction is going to be purely aesthetic. And that has to do with where you decide to chop this off and where you decide to chop this off. So for me personally, I wanted to keep this hood because this seemed like a natural edge that I wanted to maintain, and I didn't mind cutting off the tail end. Some of you might like that idea, others won't mind cutting some of this off, similar to the original body style, and then maintaining a longer tail. So it really depends just aesthetically which direction you want to take. If you want to have more hood and less tail, or less hood and more tail. You're going to want to remove those posts. For this WO Toys 144001, there's 6 screws. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that you'll need to remove to take off this deck. Because how these body posts, not this one in particular, but the stock body post is attached right there from a screw underneath. So this plate comes off and you just literally unscrew those. And the reason why we're taking the posts off is so that when we make a judgment on how far forward and how far back the body shell will sit, we can push this down as tight as we can without the body post getting in the way. Because we're not going to want to cut holes for the body posts just yet, or even at all, depending on how you want to mount this. While we're talking about body posts, this may be a good time to consider alternative methods on how you'll mount the body. So obviously for the cleaner look, you're going to get either rid of the body posts or you're going to trim them down so that they're at a proper height so that not much of it sticks out. So other methods apart from using body posts are using magnets, and sometimes you can buy online body posts that have a top with a neodymium magnet, and then you'll have a magnet on the underside and it'll just snap to it. Another method that people have used, particularly for this car, is to use Velcro. And so on the side of the chassis, you'll see there's quite a bit of space here. So what people have done is they put a Velcro strip here, and then they put Velcro on the underside of there. And so literally it'll just sit in place, and then you just squeeze it to secure it. So again, you want to consider whether you're going to use posts, and if you are going to use posts, whether you're going to use them in the stock locations or whether you're going to find some way to offset it. So far we've cut this edge and we've cut this edge, and you've been contemplating using those 4 limits we talked about earlier on how to chop this off versus here, whether you want more hood and less tail or less hood and more tail. Once you've made that decision, that's going to be your next most crucial cut, and that is going to be literally chopping that off. So once you make that decision, you're going to go ahead and cut it a straight line down. Don't start cutting here yet. We're not there yet. You're going to cut this straight, and you will have plastic here, which is fine. The goal of making this cut and this cut is so that it can sit on the chassis between the shock posts. So that's the purpose of cutting that. That's the only purpose as of this moment. So go ahead and consider those 4 limitations, determine where you want to cut it, and go ahead and cut that straight down and cut this straight down without any worry about this angle just yet. So far you've cut off this edge, and you've made your decision, and you've cut the front and you've cut the rear. So the next decision we're going to make is this point, not this angle nor where this ends here, but this point, whether it's going to be here or here or here or here. So what determines this is going to be the clearance of your suspension. And for this front end, it's going to be this tie rod. So you'll see this tie rod is the thing that's most furthest to the rear of the car. It's going to be right there. So when this comes up and down, you want that to clear the shell and not hit the shell. So that's where this corner decision comes from. So when you're placing your body on the chassis, depending on how yours fits in, you're going to go ahead and clunker that down as far as it needs to go, and then you're going to manually use your hand and you're going to move that up up and down, as far as it goes. And since you don't have this gap yet, as you're moving that up, you're gonna see it hit. You're gonna see it hit over and over. So again, place it down as far down as it needs to go, and then you're gonna move that suspension up until it hits that edge. And wherever that is, you're gonna go ahead and mark with a marker. For every line that you cut on the body, you don't have to eyeball it. So remember, there's actually a protective overspray film across the whole body when you buy it new. And that's to protect the body from paint from getting on there as you're spraying on the underside. So that means you can actually draw on the outside and it won't appear on the shell when you're done. So what you can do, which I recommend, is to use just a permanent marker, and you can actually draw the line that you intend to cut, and then you're gonna fit it on the body, and you're gonna make a judgment on whether that's exactly where you want to cut. If it's not, you can redraw the line with the marker, or you could just cut using that initial line as a reference. This next part is going to be a little bit tricky because it's going to involve a bit of eyeballing. So you've already marked this corner and you've already nicked it a little bit. And the next move we're going to make is to cut this angle and find where this angle ends. So you're gonna have to play around with the clearance of the suspension, and you will have to eyeball where this curve happens, at what steepness, and where it ends here. So in my situation, this is how it looks like. So the best advice I can give you is to trim as little bit of it as you can, and then it's basically trial and error. You're going to trim it, you're going to place it, you're going to trim it, you're going to place it until you find the angle that you like. And then obviously you'll just mimic it on the other side of the body. I don't have my magnets to secure the body in place fully, but I did want to show you the rear of the body to show the clearance. So that in my situation, this is what it looks like. So again, you want to find this corner here where my pinky is, same as we did with the front, and where that happens needs to clear, in this case, the arm of the rear suspension. And again, you're going to have to eyeball how high and where this angle terminates based on the highest level of where the suspension bottoms out. So in this case, you can see it's fairly close. It's actually perfect. So if I wanted to keep more of the shell, I suppose this angle could have been further to the right or further to the rear. But this arm clears nicely and this top part clears nicely. So I'm going to show you just a little bit more detailed shots of my cuts in case you want to do something similar. All right, so good luck, and that's the end of the tutorial. Okay, hopefully you got what you came for and you're able to trim the body. If you have any questions, feel free to leave comments below and I'll answer those as soon as I can. Take care, see you next time, bye.